Workshops there and given readings there.
On your writing or to do your writing.
So are you ready? Imani's Moon. And remind themselves, I can do this, I just have to persevere.
This is a literary magazine that students produce.
Thank you so much for coming.
There's just levels of developmental appropriateness. So
came from the idea that, the more Pride celebrations I go to, the more kids.
And then you have this great research on the ground. Some young lady who was a research librarian who sent
Today I'll be doing a panel with Jodi Angel and Lois Abraham on short fiction. And so Jodi and Lois both write traditional short stories, and I'm glad that I'm included in the group because these are non-traditional short stories. It's kind of a new form of short story. And the three of us work really well together. We've done panels before where we kind of talk about our different processes. They're similar in some ways and different in others. I think it's good for people who understand traditional short story writing to also have a little bit of the micro or flash fiction information thrown into that conversation.
So, hi folks. So this is our short story panel featuring Jodi Angel, Jason Sinclair Long, Lois Abraham, all accomplished short story writers, published, well, with two different publishers. Lois is a prize-winning fiction and creative nonfiction writer who teaches English at American River College. Circus Girls and Other Stories. It's her first short story collection. She's got a novel, Tina Goes to Heaven, presently seeking an agent. And is a beloved professor at American River. Jason Sinclair Long, also a beloved teacher at American River College and high school. Which high school, sorry?
That's Placer High School.
Placer. This is his book, Tiny Giants, 101 stories under 101 words. So when we're talking about short fiction, this tall man is the man to talk about, to. Jason studied theater and American literature at UC Santa Cruz, has an MFA in playwriting from UCLA, and is a former member of the Blue Man Group, where Jodi Angel did not appear. Jodi, yeah, I just was going to clarify that. Jodi Angel is, gosh, an alum from American River College, right? Or Sac City, or both. Both. Now teaches for Sac City. Is an accomplished short story writer. I found this nice little blurb from San Francisco Chronicle. Angel bravely does what many writers are afraid to do. In tough, sometimes brutally lyrical language, she gives young, desperate voices, including their slaying, full reign of the stage. And, you know, I would love to read all of these quotes from Esquire, New York Times. Jodi's been getting a lot of attention in the literary world, including what's the right word? A nod from Best American Short Stories. Nod isn't the right word.
Actually, I have a story currently in the new Best American Mystery Stories 2014.
Oh, that's news. Cool. Yeah. So you can stick around for the mystery panel coming up. I was going to ask just that each give a quick little reading from their work so we just get a flavor of what it's like, and then we can start asking questions and so on. So who wants to start?
I will start.
Lois Ann.
I will start. I thought what I would do is I wanted to read you the first sentence from 3 different stories, because they're quite different stories. I don't have a theme that I can identify. Maybe that's just because I can't identify it. But the first one I wanted to read was the first sentence in the book, because people ask me, oh, is it about the circus? Oh, cool. And it's like, well, here's the deal. The first sentence says, this is from Circus Girl, Jill was the only girl who had ever run away from the circus, the only one she had ever heard of anyway. So there you go, that was the circus. Done. No, there's actually a little bit more, but, and I also wanted to read you the first sentence of David Fell and Karen Rose. And this is, I think about this story a lot because I have no idea why I wrote it or how or anything, but I think it has to do with when people say everything happens for a reason, and then other people say actions have consequences, and it's kind of like, I don't know. I think probably actions have lots of consequences and things happen for lots of reasons, I guess. So this is my first sentence. It's not quite the whole first page, but it's close. And it's a rhetorical device. Because Mrs. Howarth had the worst cold she'd had in years and forgot to send the job announcement out until Good Friday, thus causing it to run while a large percentage of the population had escaped the city. Because Mitzi Tegner took her new roommate's advice about dressing for the interview, no, really, wear the red one. It shows your boobs, and sexy is what gets you hired, really. Because Dr. Harrison was concerned about the possibility that he had gone entirely too far in discussing Henry Miller with an uncomfortable Heidi Wacker with his office door closed, because Dr. Rasmussen had been dreaming blissful, bread-scented dreams about his Danish grandmother for several nights running, because David Fell was distracted by the intense pain in his gut, which was not responding to home remedies or over-the-counter bromides, and so was unable to bring his usual incisive and humane intelligence to the process of evaluating applicants, because Patty was informed rather than consulted about the hiring of her office assistant, much to her irritation. For all of these reasons, Karen Rose Anderson became General Dogsbody in the Department of American Studies, and so was in an ideal position to glean as much as possible from David Fell's death. And then here's this one's not long, this is a short one. This is from a story called Rhoda Welkin. And this is the first sentence. This is her maiden name. She's not Rhoda Welkin yet, but Rhoda Hale was born with blue feet. There you go.
Jodi, you want to take a stab?
They say that you can find out everything that you need to know about a book and what thematically it's about and how it's going to be read by reading page 69. So this is called the page 69 test, so I will read for you page 69 of my book.
Oh, well, yeah.
She pulled me closer to her so she could sweep her hand over the trunk, the dusty blue paint thick with Bondo where the rust had bubbled through. "Sonny, this is Casper," she said. I looked at the man in jeans. He was younger than my mother, or maybe the same age, it was hard to tell. His face was windburned and peppered with scruffed beard as though he didn't shave often or well. He had long eyelashes like Ruby and those sharp eyes, and when he hit his cigarette, he curled back his lips and held the butt with his teeth so that I could see that they were straight but not very clean. He's our savior, no doubt about it. We're damn lucky we pulled in here. Of all the driveways we could have turned down, he's the one who happens to be a mechanic. I'm telling you, my luck is always too goddamn good to believe. Except for the fact that you bought a car that broke down, I said. Oh, you, she laughed. She pushed me away from her so that my tennis shoes kicked up loose gravel. Always quick to point out every little thing, Mr. Negative. That's what I should call you, don't you think, Casper? Mr. Negative right here with his ungratitude and giving his mom a hard time when all she did was buy him a classic car just like he wanted. Casper looked at me and blew smoke up toward the watery sky. I wanted to tell her that this wasn't the car I wanted. I wanted a '69 Camaro, and what I ended up with was a 1970 GTO. It wasn't even the right color. But the worst part about the whole thing was that I didn't care about having a car at all.
Jason?
Sure, I'll do what you did. I'll read 3 things.
Is it okay? My stories are really short, so I can read 3 entire stories. And one of them will be on page 69. So let's see. So this first story, this is one of the longer stories. It's probably about 85 words long. And this one's called Stephanie and Alexandra. We found a baggie of pot hidden inside Steph's dad's garage. It was rolled into a neat hot dog shape. I thought she'd be scared too, but we stole it. We hiked out beyond her property to the pond where we met some boys who were torturing a broken-winged bird. Steph's eyes kind of squinted and one side of her mouth smiled. "Trade you," she said, offering the weed. We carried the bird home, taking turns holding it in our palms. It died an hour later in Steph's room, but it was still a good trade. And then I'll do another one, just to show you how they're kind of different thematically. So this is a teen paranormal romance story, because I feel like I needed to write one. They sell very well, all over in Barnes & Noble. So this is my stab at it. It's called Made in Hell. Celeste was a vampire of the highest order. Frank was a zombie from the wrong side of the tracks. Their parents, of course, forbade any connection between them. They, of course, fell in love anyway and met on moonlit nights by secret rendezvous. She never tried to turn him. He never even thought about eating her brains. And then this is my page 69 story. So this is, I guess, is what my book's all about. This story is called Spare a Buck. Canine-throated, his voice barked up from the dirt, grime, shadow stink of the streets. I was broke, so all I could think was to sit with him on the curb and share a few words. What he had to say made sense, and so I stayed. And so I stay. And here I am. Thank you.
So one of the first things I wanted to ask is to hear a little bit about like how these particular books came into being. It's easy to ask that of Jason, who has a bizarre little story about it. It might be a weirder question for the rest of you, but yeah. What either what is there a story behind the making of this book, or just what were the greatest challenges in putting this particular collection together? We'll start with Jason because I already know his answer, which is a great answer.
Yeah,
how he made this book.
So a couple of years ago, I don't know how many years it was now, like 4 years ago or something like that, I think. I decided to write a short story, a very short story, every day for a year, in hopes of being able to feel like I was completing something rather than trying desperately to work on some longer work and not getting anywhere. So I rolled a couple of 8-sided dice, and then the rolling of the dice would determine the length of the story for that day. So it was anywhere between 11 and 88 words. So I spent the year writing stories every day and posting those to a blog, and then took on a couple of different challenges throughout the year. In October, I wrote an October-related story every day, and in December, I took titles from readers of the blog, and then I wrote stories to those titles, also to the word count that I was rolling. And then at the end of it, I was shopping around the entire collection. Ad Lumen approached me and said, you know, we'd like to do something with it, and then Lois, who was my editor, and I got together and kind of pulled 101 stories out of the 365. So that's why it kind of has this maniacal jumping around feeling, because every day was just a different day. Ladies.
Let's both look at Jodi.
Oh.
Okay. My short story collection came to be written because I thought, how could I get rich quick? Write some short stories and sell them. Surely that will make me famous and rich within a short amount of time. And, you know, it's just totally happened. I just love the short story form. I used to be a poet for a very short amount of time. And the next step was I wanted to be a fiction writer, but I couldn't write very long. So short stories seem to be the right place to go. Actually, I love short stories because they tend to have their own rules. They're very structured. They make their own demands, and I love the short story form. Writing about teenage boys came about because that was the first narrative voice that took hold, and so I wrote that story and then wrote 10 more. So that's how I wrote this book.
That said from someone who grew up in a family of girls.
Yes, so I don't know why. I think that the male point of view, because it's so unfamiliar, is the best stretch of my imagination and forces me to be someone not me. Forces me to really write from a point of view that is unfamiliar and imaginative for me. So.
Lois Ann.
Well, I've been writing short stories for a long time, but I would write one and go, God, that's so great, and then I would not write one because nobody cared. And so it's like, well, I have a whole and then I ended up sharing an office with Christian Kiefer, who's the head honcho editor of Ad Lumen Press, and he's a writer. And I went, hey, you want to read a short story? And he said, sure. And so then I started just shoveling them in his direction because he was so nice about it. Wow, this totally rocks. It's like, oh, wow. I just thought it was a good short story, but it rocks, and it was fun. And he's a good reader. He's really a good reader. And so then we were working on putting together Ad Lumen Press, and we decided to do a collection of my work. It turns out that a lot of these short stories were written over a lot of years, like 40, 30, 35, I really don't know, but just a long time. And so some of them are that's the way they were when I wrote them, and they're still pretty much unchanged. Others underwent a total facelift, because I know I'm a better writer than I was 100 years ago. And I got lots of good feedback from my sister. I always give her a nod, because she was so helpful. And then some of them I wrote just right before publication. It's like, oh, do this. Here's a new one, get it in there, and it was fun. And it also has the first chapter of my next novel, not the first chapter, the fourth chapter of my next novel in it as the last story, as hopefully kind of a little teaser. Like, don't you want to read that, And to me, it's like, hadn't I better write the thing first, But anyway, that's my story.
So it's all about money, is really what you were saying, too. It's all about money for you, too.
Oh, yeah, it's all about money and fame. I think fame more for me. Yeah.
So that's the takeaway message today. Short stories, money.
Yeah, the paparazzi are driving me nuts.
Well, so, Jodi brought it up, so that was another thing I wanted to ask. So, so I teach creative writing. Everybody here, Jodi, I don't know if you've taught creative writing for Sac City. So everybody here has. So we always have all these advice and rules for fiction. Do you actually pay attention to those when you write? For example, it's always about, you have this character in conflict that starts the story, and it must rise to a climax that ends the conflict. And do you think about that stuff when you're writing, or is it all just back there in your lower brainstem, not conscious?
I don't think about it.
I do think about the fact that my page 1 had better be so stellar that my reader wants to get to page 2. That's what I think about most. Page 1 had better be so good that you want the next page.
Yeah.
Can we interrupt for questions?
Absolutely.
Please tell us what you consider stellar.
Good question.
You can go now. Yeah.
No, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what it is that trouble has to start on page 1. And the voice has to be really strong on page 1, and it has to move so quickly, I think, on page 1 that your reader can't help but to get sucked in. Like, things have to be happening on page 1. It can't be a big throat clearing of, we're getting to it soon.
I think it's sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think it's the same rule as in screenwriting, but in a screenplay, it's the first 10 pages, and there's this contract with the audience. And the contract is ostensibly about not turning the TV off or walking out of the theater. And in this case, I guess turning to page 2 or in my case, you know, reading the next story. Yeah. Reading, yeah. Getting to sentence 2. Yeah. I think my titles, you know, the titles had better be stellar in something so short like this, but it's the same basic rule. It's like a contract with the audience.
So compelling voice, get the problem going, because the human, well, that's what I've always heard, is right, our brains are we're designed to be problem solvers. So we want some kind of problem or conflict right away. Right. That we're going to read the story to see how it gets fixed.
Trouble is interesting. You know, hell makes for good literature. Heaven doesn't so much.
Yeah, right.
Things going down.
That's why we're so depressing all the time in our writing. How about the end then? Okay, there's the beginning, but like, do you know when the story's over? Do you have to set it down and walk away for 5 years? Do you have a formula for how this thing's got to end? Because I do think that the ends of short stories are this miracle every time. Yeah. When they work well.
Yeah. I think about probably ends more than beginnings, and I found I'm looking at my own book. I shouldn't even tell you this, but I'm looking at my own book and I'm going, a lot of times it's the end of the story, and I bring some kind of animal in. A dog, a cat, you know, and there's some kind of interaction there that sort of tells the whole story in small. And I don't know. I think that's a weird mannerism, frankly, but I've noticed that I do that a couple of 3 or 4 times with, you got to get an animal in there and have them, I don't know, yeah, wrap it up, sit, or something.
That's what my PhD dissertation will be on, is Lois Ann Abraham's animals.
I think you should.
Oh
yeah, they're there. But I think like a good poem, like the only kind of good poem that I can understand anyway, that they have to end with a roundness that kind of, I don't know. It's like with music. How do you know you get back to tonic, right? You get back to the chord one chord, and however you've modulated to get there, then it comes down to that. So that's. I'm looking at you.
Okay, my endings. Yeah, I don't believe in resolution. So my stories, I think, I get a lot of crap about the way my stories end. That they don't end enough. That people want more, like I should tell my reader how to feel about this ending or how to think along the lines of this character, and I refuse to do that. I end my story at the point where everything's about to expand. And if you have followed the character through the story, then you really know how the character's going to make choices at the end. And they probably will be ill-informed choices and not very good ones, but there is the hope that this time will be different. But I don't provide resolution or closure. I don't think life provides resolution or closure. And because short stories are really just a glimmer that we catch out of the corner of our eye, there is no resolution or closure. We pass it like we pass somebody on the sidewalk. Just because the car continues forward doesn't mean that person disappears from the sidewalk. We get that split second. That's what a story is. So it continues after it's over, ultimately.
My stories don't have endings.
No. They do have endings.
Well,
what's that last word?
Well, and I'm going to give Lois Ann credit once again for this, because she said something incredibly intelligent at one of our readings that I hadn't realized. And so now I'm co-opting it as my own, but it comes from Lois Ann. And it's true, my stories in this collection do have endings, I guess, that kind of in the same way that Jodi's describing, I think. And the endings of these stories, I think, are in the titles of the stories. And I'm stealing that directly from Lois Ann. So you read the title, you read this incredibly short piece of microfiction that's kind of just like a creamy middle of the cookie. And then you refer back to the title, and it provides some sort of, I don't know what, not really closure, but some sort of clue, kind of retro-engineers your understanding of what's happened in this middle part, and then the titles themselves become the endings, which is like so smart. I wish I had thought of it.
You can have it from now on.
Okay. No, I always want to give you credit.
In teaching literature to students, it's these endings without a clear resolution that are the most baffling and frustrating to new readers. But I do get the feeling that what Jodi's describing it's what short stories do nowadays, right? And I think of James Joyce's epiphany, kind of what you're describing, that we're aiming for the full manifestation of the character. We don't know that if he's going to be happy ever after or sad, but we really get him. So we have a pretty good guess what'll happen next, but we don't say what his fate will be. But see, I'm asking you these questions because I'm a man driven by principles like, well, this has to be a James Joyce ending, or oh no, I'm aiming for Edgar Allan Poe's singular effect of a short story.
I kind of like the iffy epiphany, where you have an epiphany, but it's probably not true, after all. The iffy epiphany. Yeah, the iffy epiphany. Because I don't think I'm not living happily ever after in this. Now I want to say exactly what Jodi just said. So I'm not giving them happy ever after. When I'm talking about the roundness, I'm really talking about the language. That the language has to do that. But my characters often wander off into the dark, and you don't know quite what's going to happen with them, and they don't know. And it's because, as Jodi says, that's life. You don't know. You really don't know. It's the future, right?
Excuse me, that's what they believe, but what do they teach their students is the most important part about writing a short story?
Money.
I tend to look at what they've done and work with it. I don't come at it from the rules point of view, but I go, okay, you've got this character. Why isn't he more interesting? What are you going to do? How are you going to complicate his life? You know, it's like, oh, he's a really great guy and everybody likes him. Then he goes to the store and buys tomatoes and nobody cares, right? And so it's like, how are you going to challenge him as a character? So I don't start from the outside. I really start with text.
I do teach the rules to my creative writing students, but I try to let them know that those rules have shifted a lot over the years and over the decades, and so it's important to know the historical precedent that was set for short story writing a long time ago, and that ancient arc that everybody teaches in high school that you can draw like this on the board. And that's a good thing to teach, and it's good to know that those rules were there and have been there for a very long time so that you know how to break them correctly. And mostly I try to teach my students how to break the rules in kind of an innovative way, or at least in a way that is true to what they want, you know, what it feels like their story wants to be.
I do a combo of the both. I teach the rules, work from the text, and then they have to understand the rules that they're breaking in order to break the rules, I think. So, you know, but I like to look at what they're doing in order to apply rules, to apply an understanding with what they're working with, because it's more difficult, I think, to talk about the principles of short story writing in the vague, ethereal sense, in the craft sense out there, without being able to apply them. This is what you're doing here, you know.
Any other burning questions out there? I got this one. So a friend of mine once said that when her first book was published, that she said, David, publishing's better than sex. Getting published, that is. And I was angry at her because that was sacrilegious to me at the time. But what do you think? So and maybe not exactly along those lines. But what is being published now? How has that changed you writing, thinking about writing? Has it done anything?
I found it very encouraging.
Yeah.
It's very encouraging. Oh, people will read it. Oh, well, cool then. I'll write some more things, and maybe they'll want to read those too.
For me, in terms of getting published, here's what I'm realizing right now is I don't think I've looked at the back of my book this long in a very long time. Like a very long time. And what I've forgotten is the feeling that I had when I first got the blurbs for my book. And my publisher would send them to me one at a time. And I would think, oh my God, Dorothy Allison read my book. And even if she didn't read all of it, even if she read some of it, but said something so beautiful about it, how would I have ever thought 5 years ago or 10 years ago that Dorothy Allison, one of my greatest literary heroes and idols, would read something that I wrote? That to me has been the reward of publishing, is those small things of having somebody who I idolized or respected read my work and say something positive about it. I don't think it's been about going places and reading my work. I don't think it's been about the numbers or the sales or anything else, but the fact that I have these blurbs on the back, and I always will, and know that these writers read my stuff. And I think that's what changed me, was that small piece right there.
I just like being famous.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm really famous. I'm not. I like both of those answers, so I'll take both of them. And I also like, I'll probably not do this again and write very, very, very short stories. I'm working on a novel right now. But I like, this is going to sound really bad, but I really like this on the bookshelf, like nestled between whoever. And I can move it around and put it between Faulkner and Steinbeck, and then I can take it out and put it between Kiefer and Abraham and Jodi Angel, and then I can, you know, move it around, and it looks cool on the bookshelf, which is just totally an honest, private answer. But it is very encouraging to think that maybe, you know, I write something else.
My books are in alphabetical order, and I actually had to get rid of, like, I had to like throw my Stephen King book away because I didn't want my book next.
Yeah, yeah. That's,
I had to like.
It's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, who are you next to in the bookstores?
I'm next to Dorothy Allison a lot.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would.
That works alphabetically,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And Lois and Abraham.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen myself in many bookstores.
I don't know
Mostly
who
it's
I'm
a
by.
little
Who am I by?
pile
Gary
on it.
Larson? I don't know. Yeah, it depends on where they put it. Usually it's in the front, right next to the register. It's one of those like, it's one of those. They're trying to sell it like a candy bar.
It's an impulse.
It's an impulse item.
It's an impulse item. Get
It's-
a lighter and
yeah,
my book.
Exactly.
And a pack of
Exactly.
gum, and there you go.
So what's the current biggest writer's challenge you're facing, or is there like a lingering, this is, you know, a little too personal, but anxiety, something, you know, that's, someday I'm going to be able to write this, but I can't yet, or anything like that, or no?
I like what I write, and so I don't ever have those. I really do. I mean, it's not really egotism. It's like, ooh, I'm really writing what I want to read, and sort of reading it as I write, and so that's cool. My biggest challenge right now is I'm in the middle of a novel. I am 44.1% through with the first draft, and I've just gotten to the point that I've been like pushing towards through the first part, setting up and working towards, and it's a really big explosion is what it is. It's very hard to write about disasters from a limited point of view, because I know a lot about the disaster, but I have to participate in it as a victim of it, a survivor of it, and I found that it was really hard to stay there long enough to write it a sustained chapter. So I'm still working on that chapter, it just means I need time when nobody's going to interrupt me to just be there and be that. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge to get that. Yeah. I'm done.
All right. I agree. I think that I'm working on a novel right now, and it's very difficult because it's different than short stories. I understand how short stories work, and I like the short story form. I like the compression. I like the challenge of getting everything done that I want to accomplish in the course of a story. So writing a novel is a lot different. You know, and because it's longer, the tension rules change. You know, I'm used to things being a lot tenser in a short story, and it's different. So I don't know. I'm supposed to be working on my novel.
Ditto. It's so hard to write. After this stuff, I'm having a really difficult time. I'm struggling over every word, which is dumb. So it's taking much longer than it's supposed to finish my novel, but I'll get there.
There's a lot of words in a novel, I find.
So
like
many
a
words.
Lot of words.
Yeah.
Thousands of them.
Thousands,
I mean,
tens of
like
thousands.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Just if you use a lot of passive voice, you'll change every verb into like 2 or 3 words.
Or you can just put really.
I use
Really?
a lot. I use a lot of adjectives.
Yeah.
Altogether.
Say
Yeah.
then all the time, and
Yeah.
then, and then.
And then he went to the store to buy tomatoes.
And then it was later in the day.
And then, yeah, sure enough, strangely enough.
Also, I'll give a plug-in for Summer Words, which is American River College's writing colloquium is the word, that happens at the end of every May, and our panelists have all led workshops there and given readings there. Well, thanks very much, folks, and see you downstairs buying books.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
The only way to improve upon your writing or to do your writing is to sit down and do it. You can talk about it, you can read craft studies on it, you can make plans, you can attend conferences, but the only way to do it is to sit down at the page and write. Exactly, there's no magic pill, no formula, no insider tracked information. You have to sit down and go through it, and that's the only way to produce your writing.